Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's meeting on our provisional prevention strategy for hamstring injuries. As we all know, hamstring injuries are widely prevalent in the elite soccer and accounts for approximately 37% of all injuries, and is estimated to be 1.1 injury per 1,000 hours of gameplay. The repercussion of hamstring strain is detrimental, as research have shown that they not only affect the player's performance, such as their running speed, but to also negatively impact the team's performance and club's finances. And with this condition being so prevalent and detrimental, it is imperative that our hamstring strain prevention strategies, both the primary and secondary, to be most effective for our players' performance and for the club's success. Recently, I have shared an article by Timmins with you all on the relationship between short biceps femoris fascicle eccentric flexor weakness and the risk of hamstring injury in elite football players. So, before we delve into the extrapolation of this paper's data, I thought it is worthwhile for us to first understand the study's limitations for us to truly appreciate the nature of the results. The study, being a prospective cohort study, suggests an association between the exposure and outcome rather than the causation, and that addressing the identified factors of this paper will not guarantee the prevention of hamstring strain injuries. Additionally, the study did not account for unique extrinsic factors such as training programs, load, fatigue, and environmental conditions. For instance, a player may have inherently strong knee flexor eccentric strength, but overloading and fatigue could have reduced the force output over time. And that since the study identifies eccentric weakness as a risk factor, this oversight potentially could have affected the validity of its finding. Furthermore, the study had limitations, including a small sample size and the exclusion of certain athletes from strength assessments, which introduced potential biases in the measure of association. So, despite these limitations, the study does thoroughly consider the intrinsic factors, accounting for variables such as height, age, previous injuries, and imbalances. With that out of the way, looking into the key findings of the study, Timmins' study highlights that soccer players who've suffered a hamstring strains tended to possess shorter biceps femoris long fascicle lengths and weaker eccentric contraction strength. Additionally, non-modifiable factors such as age and history of hamstring strains to change depending on the biceps femoris fascicle length, as well as their eccentric knee flexor strength. Overall, Timmins' study had its merits. The study population sampled was in the A League, which is considered a bit lower level compared to Premier League. It still is comparable to the Premier League, indicating that the extrinsic factor previously mentioned as limitations such as exposure will be at a similar level. Therefore, the findings of this report is highly transferable to our club. Using Timmins' study, I propose to introduce a set of provisional hamstring strain injury protocols. As earlier mentioned, the biceps femoris long head fascicle length had affected the risk of future hamstring strain injuries. Thus, for secondary prevention, the architecture of the biceps femoris long head will be assessed at the beginning and at the end of the preseason for all players, with the second measurement serving as the baseline length for the season. Additionally, length will be measured for players both initiating and completing rehabilitation following a hamstring strain when they are ready to return to play. Given that each individual has unique and muscle morphology, it is difficult to determine the normative fascicle length. However, Timmins' research suggests that achieving symmetrical fascicle length and an improvement of 0.5 centimeters in fascicle length can reduce the risk of hamstring strain injuries by 74%. All players should demonstrate this 0.5 centimeters improvement in their subsequent ultrasound imaging. And that injured players should also attain a symmetrical fascicle length between the limbs under contraction, as a recent review found that fascicle length shortening was greater on the affected limb compared to the unaffected limb when under contraction. This increased shortening, combined with football training and competition known to induce a greater increase in concentric contraction, and which that would promote further fascicle shortening, would increase the likelihood of re-injury. And that it is imperative that for those who do not meet these criteria, that training should continue with a greater focus on eccentric hamstring strength, which is shown to improve the length capacity of the hamstring fascicles. Adding to the secondary prevention, we will be also screening the eccentric hamstring strength 72 hours following a match. While elite ball sports athletes are documented to return to pre-match functional performance by the 48-hour mark, research indicates biochemical markers such as high creatine kinase levels not returning to pre-match levels within this time frame. And that elevated creatine kinase level often indicate muscle tissue disturbance and the leakage of intracellular muscle constituents in the circulation. Additionally, because eccentric strengthening is a highly demanding movement on the muscle, testing performance earlier than 48 hours may not accurately represent the hamstring's capabilities and also may increase the risk of injury from the high level of exertion. As such, the 72-hour mark has been selected. As for the cut-off score from surveillance, according to Timmins' study, athletes with limb imbalances greater than 15% will be removed from match and directed to a specific flowchart as shown on screen. Additionally, elite soccer players with eccentric hamstring strength below 4.35 Newton per kilograms were reported 4.4 times more likely to sustain a hamstring injury, and that players whose strength falls below this threshold will be also placed on this pathway. This flowchart is similar to that of the adductor surveillance pathway created by Dr. Wolin. This will enable us all to adapt and communicate the milestone needed for the players to return to sports to the coach and the players effectively and ensure that the standard of care is maintained. So unlike Dr. Wolin's flowchart, instead of using the Hagos, we will be assessing internal and external load to screen for hamstring strain injuries. This data will be obtained through the GPS heart rate vests and by players submitting their rated perceived exertion 30 minutes following each training and match session. While there are multiple theories regarding the mechanism of hamstring strain, it is widely understood that the accumulation of excessive mechanical loading, especially in sports involving high level of sprinting, contributes to micro injuries in the biceps femoris that subsequently leads to macro injuries, such as the strain. Therefore, close monitoring is essential. However, similar to muscle morphology and normative data for eccentric hamstring strength, the load experienced varies between players based on their position, recovery time before matches, time of season, and fitness level. The total weekly load experienced by each player will be benchmarked against the individual's weekly load profile and to our expectation in change of load based on our periodization plan. Importantly, it should not also exceed 10% of the load from the previous week, as research points out that 40% of injuries to be associated with a rapid increase of more than 10% in load. For primary prevention of hamstring injuries, our focus will be lengthening the biceps femoris long head architecture. The literature indicates that this muscle is most vulnerable to strain due to its high fatigability and increased lengthening during a sprint. Therefore, having a well-conditioned and resilient biceps femoris can significantly reduce the risk of hamstring strain injuries. Eccentric strength exercise have shown to be the most effective, promoting fascicle length changes. And although there aren't specific exercises documented that targets the biceps femoris alone, Nordic exercises have proven to be highly effective and should be included into the athlete's training program. While a high volume of eccentric strengthening is ideal, considering the player's overall load, a block of intensive eccentric exercise followed by a period of lower load has been sufficient to produce and maintain changes in muscle architecture. During the preseason strengthening, all players should include Nordic and other eccentric hamstring exercises completing 64 repetitions per week, followed by maintenance of 5 repetitions per week during the in-season. And by incorporating these strategies, we aim to reduce the incidence of hamstring injuries through effective conditioning and targeted exercise routines. To finish off, to ensure everyone is on board with these changes and to facilitate streamlined implementation, we will reconvene in a month's time to discuss the implementation process and evaluate the effectiveness of this prevention plan. I thank you for all your attention. Let's work together to make this strategy successful. So if you do have any questions in the meantime, please let me know.